Okay, so for the last part of our unit that we need to finish notes for is over fruits. So the first thing you need to talk about is what is a fruit? So when we are looking at a fruit, you need to know that a fruit is a matured, ripened ovary. So every time you eat an apple, every time you eat a grape, what you are actually putting inside of your mouth is the female sex organs of that plant. You are eating the ovaries of that plant when you bite into that fruit. Now, fruits usually contain seeds, because fruits are a reproductive organ and seeds are like your baby plants, but some fruits also have other flower parts attached to them. So that is besides your ovary, besides your seeds. So an easy example to think of is apples usually have a stem attached. That stem is what attach the flower for the apple to the branch of the apple tree. So that is an extra flower part left over. Now, many of the food items that we normally think of as being vegetables, they're actually fruits when we think of them botanically. So cucumbers, they are a fruit. Squash, tomatoes. So any type of plant, any type of vegetable that has seeds on the inside, in the middle of it, that is actually a fruit because seeds are found on the inside of an ovary. Another thing we need to realize is that all fruits come from flowers. So remember, the ovary is a part of the flower, and therefore that classification we give to all flowering plants is angiosperms. All angiosperms are flowering plants, and all flowering plants have ovaries and therefore produce fruit. All right, this next slide looks at our different parts, our different regions of the ovary. Now, the mature ovary wall is known as the pericarp. Let's try that again. The pericarp. The pericarp has three distinct layers. The outer layer is called the exocarp. So think exo means outside, like exoskeleton in bugs. They have that hard outer layer. The middle layer is called the mesocarp. And I kind of spelled this a little weird. The mesocarp, that is your middle layer. And the absolute innermost layer is your endocarp. Endo means inside of. And seeds are always found in the very, very middle or center of your ovary. So on the bottom of your slide, you have a diagram of a peach. And then color in your seed here, so it's in the center of your ovary. Now, this inner portion, this is your endocarp. This middle portion of your ovary wall, that's the meso, or the mesocarp. And then this very outer edge, this is the exocarp. And all three of these layers together come together to form the pericarp. Remember, the pericarp is the entire mature ovary. So when we're looking at fruit, there's a bunch of different ways we can classify it. And you guys have all seen different types of fruit at the store. You just never really realized what you were looking at. So there's three different groups of fruit. Those are simple, aggregate, and multiple. So let's first look at our simple fruits. There's actually the widest variety of simple fruits that we're going to cover in this class. Now, simple fruits, they are produced from a single ovary. And there's three types of simple fruits. So one of those, get my notes here, three types of simple fruits. We have fleshy simple fruits. The second type is called dry dehiscent. Now the third type of simple fruit, it is also dry, but it is called dry indehiscent. talk about what the word indehiscent means in a couple of slides. So let's look first at our simple fleshy fruits. If we're looking at a simple fleshy fruit, it has when it is ripe, and we've talked about before, if something is ripe, that means that it is mature. Get that off of there. So if it is ripe, it is mature. And fleshy fruits, when their pericarp is mature, it is soft and fleshy. Fleshy fruits have soft, fleshy, squishy pericarps. Remember, your pericarp is just that outer ovary wall. So in addition, to looking at the type of placentation a flower has, you can actually look at the fleshy fruits, and there's 3 different classifications of them. So one you are very familiar with, that is the berry, but there's 2 other ones. One is called a drupe, and one is called a pome. So let's look first at berries. So, what you normally think of as being a berry may not actually be a berry, okay? When we're thinking of it botanically. So, berries, if we're looking at a true berry, they're going to have that soft pericarp because they're a fleshy fruit, but they're also going to have a thin outer layer, a thin exocarp. So, types of true berries are peppers and tomatoes and grapes and bananas. They have that thinner outer layer, but they still have that soft inside to them, that soft pericarp. So they are actually berries. Another type of berry is called a pepo. So a pepo is a type of berry with a very thick rind. So, example of pepo berries, these are squashes, like zucchini, which I have a picture of here, cucumber, cantaloupe, watermelon, gourds. Those are pepos. Any type of fruit, or if you think of it as being a vegetable, that sometimes people will take the peel off of. So you normally do not eat the peel in a cantaloupe. You would take that off. Some people will actually peel their cucumbers too. So if you do not eat the peel of it, if it's kind of thick, if it's a rind, that is a pepo. This third type of berry, it is called a hesperidium. And we've actually talked about hesperidiums before on the very first day of school. So on the first day of school, you took an orange peel and you squeezed it onto a balloon, and it made that balloon pop. So that outside peel of your orange, remember how it felt? It was very leathery. Okay, it's kind of thick, leathery feeling. And when you squeezed that orange peel onto your balloon, it made oil come out of the peel, and that is what popped your balloon. So, you just need to know, if you have a hesperidium, that is like citrus fruits. So oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruit, they all have those leathery rinds that have oil inside of them. Our next type of simple fleshy fruit is the drupe. Drupes are a fleshy fruit, and they have a single seed. Interesting. Within the endocarp. Okay. So examples of drupes, that is olives, peaches, cherries, plums, any type of fruit that has the pit inside of that fruit. Next type of simple fleshy fruit is the pome. Pomes, they still have that soft fleshy tissue, that soft pericarp, but they have an enlarged floral cup. Remember your floral cup, your floral tube, that's like all of your flowers and your petals surrounding your ovary, and your receptacles, which your ovary sits on. So when you are eating fruits like apples and pears, you're actually eating that outer receptacle fused with the ovary and the floral tube. Now, pomes, they have an endocarp, that inner layer of their ovary, that is kind of papery. So if you've ever eaten an apple, you've probably taken that outer layer or that core out because it didn't really feel good in your mouth. That layer, that papery layer that surrounded your seeds, that was the endocarp you were having in your mouth that you didn't like the feeling of. That's that papery layer. Now, the last thing about pomes is that they contain a core. So we normally think of apples as having a core, pears have a core. So those are two examples of pomes. They just have that papery inner layer surrounding their seeds. Now let's look at our simple fruits that are dry at maturity. So our first type is our dry, dehiscent fruits. So when we are looking at a dehiscent fruit, their pericarp is going to split open at maturity. So when those seeds are mature inside of that ovary is completely finished forming, it is actually going to be dry, and it will break apart, and that will release the seeds that are inside of the ovary. So let's make sure this makes sense. When we are looking at the word dehiscent, dehiscent means to break apart. So if you have a plant with a dry, dehiscent, simple fruit, that ovary is going to break apart at maturity to release the seeds inside. However, if we have a dry, indehiscent fruit, it's still going to come from one flower. It is still a simple fruit, but those fruits, they're still going to be dry. But in an indehiscent fruit, the pericarp, the ovary, does not split open at maturity. So once again, dehiscent, it means to break apart. This is indehiscent. In, think it doesn't do it. Okay? Dry, indehiscent, simple fruits do not break apart at maturity, so the seeds stay inside of them. So think sunflowers, corn, wheat. If you're trying to eat a sunflower, you have to basically crunch on that seed or that outer layer to get the seed outside. The seed's what you wanted to eat. What you spit out, that's your ovary. Okay? Wheat also is a type of dry indehiscent fruit. It does not break apart to release the seed inside. And in both wheat and corn, the ovary is actually fused to your seed coat. That's why it's kind of hard to separate those layers out. Alright, now let's look at our aggregate fruits. So we are no longer in the realm of simple fruits. Aggregate fruits are formed from more than one ovaries, but they are still formed from a single flower. So this one flower will have several ripened ovaries. So if you look up here, we have our one flower. Here's its receptacle. Here's its petals, and we've 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ovaries attached to our receptacle. These ovaries are going to fuse together and form tiny fruitlets. And all of these fruitlets, once fused together, this is what forms the overall fruit for an aggregate fruit. So if you've ever looked at strawberries, on the outside of them, they're covered in seeds. Each one of those seeds came from an individual ovary. So you can just think of how many ovaries were inside that one flower that formed your strawberry. Same thing with raspberry. You can see all these little circle parts. These circles are your fruitlets that have all come together to make your single raspberry. And if you look at your blackberry, remember your aggregate fruits, all your ovaries joined together on top of your single receptacle. You can actually see your receptacle in the middle of this blackberry fruit. And very last slide, I'm going to talk about multiple fruits. So multiple fruits is our third and final type of fruit that I need you to know. And multiple fruits, they form from an inflorescence. An inflorescence is just a fancy way of saying a flower cluster. And that inflorescence, that flower cluster, it has many separate flowers, and each flower has its own ovary that is going to ripen and then fuse together into a single large fruit. So if you look up at the top, here's my one receptacle. Here is a flower. Here is a flower with its own ovary. Another single flower. So there are actually 6 separate flowers, each with their own ovary, all attached to the same receptacle. So if we are looking at a multiple fruit, examples of that you have seen before are pineapples. You've also probably before seen Osage oranges. They're also called hedge apples. So if you look at a pineapple, you can see on the outside it has all of these separate circles. Each one of these circle structures came from a different flower and therefore a separate ovary, but they've all fused together to make that one fruit, our pineapple. Same thing with our hedge apples. That's this green picture over here. Okay? You can see all these separate seeds. You can almost kind of see different lines inside of this fruit where it's cut in half. Each one of those lines is showing you the border of an ovary that has fused together to form our single multiple fruit, our single hedge apple. So make sure that you go through, you watch these slides, you fill out your notes, and you will have your test on Monday before Thanksgiving break. So be ready for that, but we will do some review on Thursday.